Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're excited to present a comprehensive summary of the transformative book, Difficult Conversations, by Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen. This powerful guide offers a roadmap for handling tough talks with grace and effectiveness, drawing on principles of communication, psychology, and conflict resolution. So, let's dive into the summary of this incredible book. But before we dive into the content, I kindly request a moment of your time to appreciate this video by liking it, subscribing to the channel, and ringing that notification bell. Your support means a lot to me. Thank you so much. As we delve into the core teachings of Difficult Conversations, we'll explore key concepts such as the three main conversations within every difficult dialogue: the what happened conversation, the feelings conversation, and the identity conversation. By understanding and addressing these layers, individuals can navigate conflicts with greater skill and understanding. One of the fundamental principles discussed in the book is the importance of reframing difficult conversations as opportunities for learning and growth rather than battles to be won. By shifting our mindset and approaching conflicts with curiosity and empathy, we can foster deeper connections and reach constructive resolutions. Furthermore, Difficult Conversations emphasizes the significance of active listening and genuine curiosity in understanding others' perspectives. By practicing reflective listening and asking open-ended questions, we can create a safe space for dialogue and promote mutual understanding and respect. In addition to communication techniques, the authors highlight the role of emotions in difficult conversations. By acknowledging and managing our own emotions, as well as recognizing and validating the emotions of others, we can foster a more supportive and constructive dialogue. Moreover, the book offers practical strategies for preparing for difficult conversations, setting the right tone, and handling challenging situations effectively. From recognizing common pitfalls in communication to reframing negative assumptions, Difficult Conversations equips readers with the tools needed to navigate conflicts with confidence and clarity. Difficult Conversations was written by members of the Harvard Negotiation Project, whose goal is to establish and circulate conflict resolution strategies. The first book published by the HNP, Getting to Yes, has been massively successful since its publishing in 1981. While Getting to Yes focuses on effective strategies for traditional negotiation, Difficult Conversations applies the Harvard method more broadly to everyday disagreements. Negotiations happen in everyday life, and people don't seem to want to have them. Or, more troublesome, things get worse when people do talk about the issues they're facing. This is where Difficult Conversations comes in. At their core, everyone is the same. We all have our own thoughts, feelings, and perceptions, and every day we interact with other people who have their own thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. Sometimes our thoughts conflict with someone else's thoughts, or feelings with feelings, or perceptions with perceptions. That's when difficult conversations arise. Difficult conversations aren't an anomaly you can solve once and be done with. Difficult Conversations by Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen is a guide to improving communication skills. It offers tips and examples for managing disagreements and misunderstandings to achieve better outcomes. Difficult Conversations takes a look at what makes a conversation difficult and why we often try to avoid them. It outlines how to correctly approach and maneuver through tough topics to build positive and meaningful relationships. Difficult Conversations is a valuable read that explores the art of handling tough discussions with grace and effectiveness. Here's why this book stands out. It offers practical strategies and tools that help navigate challenging conversations and resolve conflicts constructively. The authors draw upon real-life examples and relatable scenarios to illustrate their concepts, making the content engaging and relatable. With its insightful perspectives and actionable advice, the book manages to make the topic of difficult conversations surprisingly captivating and relevant. Here is a sentence showcasing the greatness of a quote of this book. "All or nothing identities are about as sturdy as a two-legged stool." Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen. Those are the individuals who truly deserve to immerse themselves in this extraordinary book. Politicians and business leaders, teachers, parents. Here are the chapters in this remarkable book, each holding valuable insights and captivating narratives that promise to engage and enlighten readers. Chapter 1. What are difficult conversations? A simple definition is this: a difficult conversation involves anything you find it difficult to talk about. Commonly, difficult conversations involve major categories like race, religion, sexuality, gender, or politics. But difficult conversations also include topics we feel insecure about, or issues that make us feel vulnerable, or matters that are important to us, or situations where the outcome is unknown, or instances that concern people we care about. In short, the situations that require difficult conversations are many and varied. You have to fire an employee at work who's now an old friend. You overhear your mother-in-law criticizing your parenting style right before you go on vacation with her. You want to tell your father how much you love him, but it makes you both uncomfortable. Your neighbor's dog has been barking nonstop at night, and you can't get any sleep. Difficult conversations are usually conversations where we fear the consequences, whether we avoid having the conversation or we raise the issue. And there are risks no matter how you choose to proceed. If we avoid the conversation, we risk having our feelings fester. Chapter 2. What happened? Mistake number 1, arguing about who's right. In the what happened conversation, people usually disagree. There wouldn't be much reason to have a difficult conversation, and therefore the what happened part of it, if everyone was in agreement. Each side typically thinks they're right and that they hold the one single truth. When we get into an argument with someone, we typically assume they're the problem. We're right, they won't listen, they're selfish or naive or controlling or irrational, so we push our own opinion harder, or try to make them see the light. But, of course, on the other side, they think we're the problem too. And they think we're stubborn or selfish or naive. In an argument, we rarely stop to pause and consider that it might be us who's in the wrong. But this is because our story makes perfect sense to us. We know why we're right. We have all the supporting evidence in our minds. Why doesn't it work? Difficult conversations are usually about differences in perception, and in this case, the only truth is that there is no truth. Asking who's right or who's wrong goes nowhere. Chapter 3. What happened? Mistake number 2. Assuming intentions. We all know our own intentions, so we never question them. But we never know the other person's intentions unless we ask. And we rarely do that in the midst of a difficult conversation. Instead, we assume we know what the other person intended to do. We assume that cutting remark was meant to hurt us, even though we know our own remark that seemed to hurt the other person's feelings wasn't meant to hurt them. The best rule of thumb for going into difficult conversations is don't assume the other person had bad intentions. Intentions influence how we view other people. We judge someone more harshly if we think they intended to hurt us, or if we think their intentions are bad or ignoble. Think of it this way. You're in a rush to get back to the office after stopping off at a cafe to get a quick bite for lunch. You go to back out of your parking spot, but you find yourself blocked in by a fancy BMW, parked in the middle of the lot. What's the first thought that jumps into your mind? Now, what if it was an ambulance with its lights on instead? This is a good metaphor for how we go into difficult conversations. Chapter 4. What happened? Mistake number 3, blame. Similar to the first mistake in the what happened conversation, most people go into difficult conversations wanting to blame the other person for what happened. If only she hadn't said or done X, this would never have happened. In our version of events, who to blame always seems clear, and rarely is it us. Focusing on blame isn't constructive because it prevents us from learning what the real problem is and doing something to fix it. Blame isn't relevant and it isn't fair. We often blame others because we don't want to be blamed. We also blame others because we equate it with talking about our feelings. You hurt my feelings, so you're to blame. The first part can be useful, the second part never is. We can't stop blaming until we understand what blame is, what motivates it, and how to move towards the idea of the contribution system instead. Chapter 5. The feelings conversation. Difficult conversations aren't just about what happened, but how we feel about what happened. We tend to avoid our feelings, especially in difficult conversations, because we feel they get in the way of progress, or are embarrassing or don't matter. It's also scary and risky to share feelings, and it leaves us feeling vulnerable. But feelings are vital to any difficult conversation. Ignoring emotions removes an integral component of the content of the conversation. The authors describe it as staging an opera without the music. You'll get the plot but miss the point. The authors encourage you to have your feelings, or they'll have you. This means emotions will come out one way or another, and you can either acknowledge and embrace your feelings and deal with them constructively, or you can deal with the aftermath of holding them back. If we manage our feelings, they can be useful. If we avoid them, they'll color our communication, ruin our relationships, and make us feel worse about ourselves. Chapter 6. The Identity Conversation. The identity conversation is an internal conversation about who we think we are and how we see ourselves. It's what you're saying to yourself about yourself. This is probably the most nuanced and difficult of the what happened components. Difficult conversations threaten our identity, who we think we are. The identity conversation is about what's at stake for us in a difficult conversation. The anxiety we feel when we think about approaching a difficult conversation is at least partially because these conversations can shake our idea of ourselves. If you see yourself as a good person, for example, but you have to fire someone at work, they probably aren't going to see you that way, which will challenge how you see yourself. Think about asking for a raise. As you prepare for the meeting, questions are flying through your mind, consciously or unconsciously. What if your boss says no? What if she has good reasons for saying no because you're not as competent as you think? Chapter 7. Whether to start a difficult conversation. Now that we've covered the 3 meta-conversations in depth, these next chapters are about how to move through a difficult conversation. The first question is important. Should you have a difficult conversation or just get over it? We can't have every single difficult conversation in life. There are too many. So sometimes it's best to let things go. But how can you tell what issues to let go and what issues to raise? Consider the purpose of the conversation, rule out conversations that won't help, and consider whether it's better to merely let go. What's the purpose of the conversation? The main purpose of any difficult conversation should be mutual understanding. This doesn't mean mutual agreement. Difficult conversations are about working to understand each other's stories better, so you can make better collective decisions about what to do next. If your purposes are focused on learning and solving together, the situation would benefit from a difficult conversation. But in some cases, a difficult conversation isn't the best path forward. Chapter 8. Beginning a difficult conversation. The beginning of a difficult conversation is usually the most stressful moment, where we either learn that bad news is coming our way, or that the person we're talking to is going to get upset. We also usually start the conversation in unhelpful ways. Difficult conversations are difficult. Most of us treat the beginning of them like we treat swimming. We close our eyes and just jump in. As a reflection on what we've covered so far, here are the attitudes to take into a difficult conversation. Replace certainty with curiosity. Don't believe that your story is the one right story. Challenge why you believe what you do, and ask what you don't know. Then be curious about someone else's story and ask questions. Adopt the stance. Embrace that both sides' stories are valid. Don't assume bad intentions of the other person. Just because you feel bad doesn't mean the other person wanted you to feel bad. Ask what the other person said or did exactly, and what assumptions you're making about the intention behind it. Even go in assuming good intentions, and phrase things accordingly. I was surprised by your comment. Chapter 9. The importance of listening. Humans want to be heard. We want to feel like someone else cares about us enough to listen. Listening is a vital skill for difficult conversations. Not only does it help us understand the other person better, but it helps them understand us better as well. Listening can transform a difficult conversation into a learning conversation. It requires us to be curious about the other person, to reframe our purpose from persuading the other person to learning about them. We need to ask questions to better understand the other person and acknowledge the other person's feelings. One of the most common complaints the authors hear about difficult conversations is that the other person isn't listening. This really means we need to be better at listening first. When we feel others aren't listening to us, we tell ourselves they're stubborn, don't care what we have to say, or don't understand it. So we often double down, repeat ourselves, and talk over the other person. The reality is that people stop listening when they don't feel heard. Chapter 10. Uphold your end of a difficult conversation. Understanding the other person in a difficult conversation is vital, but it's vital for them to understand you too, and you're responsible for how thoroughly you express yourself. If you have difficulty expressing yourself, you may be insecure about how much you deserve to speak. Remember, what you have to say is worth saying. You have the right to share your thoughts, feelings, and past experiences. Even if you're talking to a superior, your views are equally important, no more, no less. If you tend to feel that you're not entitled to speak, delve into your identity conversation. Who from your past made you believe that? What would it take for you to feel entitled? Begin at the heart of the matter. Start with what's most important to you. Many of us try to drop clues about how we feel instead of stating it outright, or we try to ease our way into the conversation. Subtext isn't the solution. Subtext is indirect communication through jokes, offhand comments, or other behavior. For instance, if you're upset at your spouse for sharing in cleaning duties, indirect expression includes statements like, "The house really could use a cleanup." Chapter 11. Controlling a difficult conversation for a better outcome. In an ideal world, everyone you enter into a difficult conversation with would have read this book and can deftly and productively handle the conversation. But that is rarely going to be the case. More often, you'll enter into a difficult conversation with someone who does all the wrong things. Your goal is understanding, theirs is being right. You acknowledge contribution, they blame. You can still have a productive, difficult conversation with someone who hasn't read this book. You do it by leading the conversation. There are 3 power moves that can help you lead the conversation in spite of the other person's lack of cooperation. Reframing, listening, and naming the dynamic. Reframing. Reframing is listening to the other person's contributions and translating them into more helpful ones. It usually uses the 3 conversations as the translation categories. Reframing helps keep a conversation on track when the other person is heading down a destructive path, and helps you translate negative statements into useful ones. And it almost always works. Anything the other person says, you can usually reframe it as a helpful contribution to a learning experience. Chapter 12, the last phase, problem solving. You've finally unpacked what happened and how it makes you both feel, and have started to understand each other's stories much better. But ultimately, you still have to work together to solve the issue, and you may disagree on how best to go about it. This is the problem-solving stage. Problem-solving is essentially collecting the information you just received and coming up with some test options that might help solve both sides' issues. Problem-solving in difficult conversations requires both parties to consider compromises and accommodation of the needs of the other person. Test your differing hypotheses. Differences in perspective usually stem from assumptions or hypotheses that conflict with each other. We usually keep these assumptions to ourselves, or we might not even know they're assumptions. If you can identify what the conflicting assumptions are, then you can come up with a fair test to see whose assumption is more valid, or how much more valid it is. Example: your neighbor's dog has been keeping you up with his barking. You talk to your neighbors and discover they just had a baby and have been keeping the dog outside at night because they're afraid. Some people are great communicators, while others cower at the thought of discussing difficult topics with another person. But sometimes there are tough conversations you can't avoid, and therefore, it's important to learn how to handle a difficult conversation. Thankfully, the authors have compiled tips and everyday examples to help you get better at unpleasant exchanges. These insights highlight the common pitfalls that blight many difficult conversations. They also provide advice on how to stop them. Finally, the insights provide you with a framework to ensure that your conversations around difficult topics stay on topic and free of hurt. Afterward, no difficult conversation will scare you away. In these insights, you'll find out about the what happened conversation, what an emotional footprint is, and how to confront a flatmate about dirty dishes. 1. You shouldn't avoid difficult conversations out of fear of the consequences. Communication is key to getting what you want, but some conversations are harder to have than others. A difficult conversation is anything you find a challenge to discuss. Common topics include race, religion, sexuality, and gender politics, but it can extend to any conversations that make you uncomfortable, such as asking your partner to quit smoking. Unpleasant talks are often avoided because the outcomes are unpredictable and the stakes are high, leaving you vulnerable. Your mind jumps back and forth, trying to decide the best course of action. Should I approach this issue, or should I just let it go? If you choose to confront it, the situation could improve. However, there's also the risk that you may get a less than favorable result. Say you decide to talk to your neighbor about his dog keeping you up at night with its incessant barking. On the one hand, he might be very understanding and offer to keep the dog inside after dark. But he may also think you're overreacting and hold a grudge against you for complaining. No matter the situation, always take up the conversation, even if it's difficult. Difficult conversations aren't ideal, but neither are barking dogs keeping you up at night. More often than not, these talks are worth the effort if there's a chance they could improve your life. So don't turn a blind eye or a deaf ear to something that's bugging you. Instead, learn how to speak up in an effective manner, which will teach you in the following insights. 2. Difficult conversations comprise of blame, feelings, and identity. Any difficult discussion consists of 3 elements happening at the same time: the what happened conversation, the feelings conversation, and the identity conversation. The what happened conversation involves fighting over who's right, assuming the other person's intentions, and assigning blame. 3. Turn the what happened conversation into a learning conversation by focusing on curiosity, impact, and contribution. A learning conversation is a discussion in which we try to work something out without fighting, blaming, silencing our emotions, or doubting ourselves. 4. Improve the feelings conversation by exploring, negotiating, and sharing your feelings. It's not easy dealing with emotions, and it's even harder trying to share them. When they threaten to embarrass us, we even go so far as to suppress our feelings. However, the learning conversation can help us address difficult emotions in 3 easy steps. 5. Focus on the intricacies of the identity conversation and refrain from controlling others' reactions. You know who you are, more or less, but you also tend to judge yourself in absolute terms. Competent or useless, mean or kind, capable or incapable of being loved. Absolute terms such as these are limiting because nothing's black and white, and as a result, you can quickly get confused about your own identity. 6. Tell a neutral third story. Though difficult conversations are tricky to initiate, you need to start somewhere. A good rule of thumb is to never start inside your own story. In conclusion, Difficult Conversations by Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen is a must-read for anyone looking to enhance their communication skills, build stronger relationships, and navigate conflicts with grace and empathy. By embracing the principles and techniques outlined in this book, individuals can transform difficult conversations into opportunities for growth and understanding. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the key insights of difficult conversations. We hope you found this summary informative and inspiring. Don't forget to like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel for more book summaries and insightful content. Leave a comment down below if you've read this book or have any other recommendations for us. If you're interested in learning more about effective communication and conflict resolution, be sure to check out the full book for a deeper dive into these invaluable lessons. You can find the link to acquire a copy of this incredible book in the description below. Until next time, remember, every difficult conversation is a chance to deepen your understanding, foster connection, and ultimately, grow as an individual. Stay curious, stay empathetic, and keep engaging in meaningful dialogues. See you in the next video.